all of you. So with that, I'm going to jump into it. I'll start you guys off with a quote. You've probably seen a version of this quote floating around in the ether as AI's kind of swept the technology industry over the last 6 months or so. And my goal with showing you a quote like this is to really hope that you'll join Otto and I in really seeing AI in contracting as a tool and a way to help you do your job better, faster, cheaper, and really empower any contract professional who's willing to adopt new tools and get excited about the future. So I hope you'll join me in that excitement. And if you're on the fence of whether this kind of stuff is right for you and your business and your role, hopefully we'll be able to do some convincing throughout this session. And I think my intent is also to convince you might already be using more AI than you think you are in your contracting processes already. So to start, let's do a quick primer and some definitions on machine learning and AI. There's a lot of alphabet soup and abbreviations, for terminology in the AI and machine learning umbrella. And I think having kind of a cheat sheet like what you'll see as I progress through this slide can be really helpful for a few reasons. One, working in contracts, I think we all know that precise language is really important for a lot of reasons. I think it's also important as you think about AI, both in terms of some of the techniques, like what you're seeing on this slide, and some of the vendors in the space, and the difference between a company and a model and a product and an API. I think these are all really important. So I'm going to start with these and just talk through some of these terms and help understand really the umbrella terms and also the overlapping terms that exist in the space. So when we talk about AI, we typically mean simulating human-like thinking with computers. And this is a big umbrella. It's quite old. It's decades old. And this current wave of popularization is only one such wave. We've seen them in the past. This one I think is particularly special and exciting. But AI not particularly new and quite broad. Then within AI, when we talk about terms like machine learning and natural language processing, these are really, this is the true Venn diagram in what we're looking at, where these are both under the AI umbrella, and they intersect quite a bit, where machine learning is really any computer software that learns from the data it's given. And natural language processing is any software that is interpreting or writing or dealing with human language. And as you can see, first of all, these overlap quite a bit. But second of all, there's, as I say in this graph, tons of other stuff going on in these spaces that has nothing to do with text or contracts or anything like that. Computer vision is really popular right now. Robotics fit into here too. Not all machine learning or natural language processing or AI has anything to do with contracts or text, but that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So a couple more terms that are kind of hotter in the space right now are LLMs. These are large language models. So these are machine learning models. They are in the NLP domain, and they're just machine learning models trained on massive text corpuses. So the LLMs, large language models, these are machine learning models. And then finally, within LLMs, we have generative text models. This is things like ChatGPT that you're probably all used to kind of seeing being very popular and new in the last year or so. These are models that they are LLMs and they produce human-like text. So they're like a chat bot or a machine learning model that its output is human-like text. So you can see how all of these things stack up to fit under the AI umbrella. And hopefully this gives some terminology and again, a cheat sheet as a starting point to think about some of these terms and, how often they're truly synonyms for each other, how often they're not, and help you be a little more precise as you're thinking about this and communicating. So even more so, we can talk about a specific company like OpenAI and get even more specific with some terminology and how some of these, different types of AI tools kind of fit in when we're talking about a single company and the products and services it has. You see people kind of misusing terms like ChatGPT or GPT-4 or OpenAI and kind of just using them all as synonyms. But I think understanding this at its foundation can really help think about the products in the ecosystem that you might be using now or in the future, whether you interact with OpenAI or ChatGPT directly or not. So the way to think about this graph here is OpenAI is a company. That's the starting point. It was founded in 2015. It is a for-profit company. People call it a startup. I don't know if that's quite right anymore, but OpenAI is a company. They have models that they've built and trained in-house. These are GPT-3, GPT-3.5, GPT-4. There's many more models. They also have models totally outside the text domain in computer vision, but these are large language models. They're machine learning models that OpenAI has trained that they own. When you're using something like ChatGPT, you're using a product. This is a product produced by OpenAI. It's a B2C product, web-based UI. Some of it's free, some of it's paid. And that is how users are directly interacting with these models that OpenAI has trained. So ChatGPT is a product. It can interact and use one or more large language models that OpenAI has produced. And then finally, what I actually think is probably the most interesting piece of the OpenAI puzzle, and the piece that I imagine most of you will be interacting with in your contracting process, is third-party apps that use OpenAI's API. So OpenAI has an API. It's more of a B2B product. It's kind of a developer platform. It's a paid service. And third-party apps use this API to embed GPT-3, GPT-3.5, GPT-4 into their product to create many, many things, which we're going to talk about further today, that don't really look much like chatbots, but they use the same technology underlying. And I actually think this is where in legal tech, we're going to be interacting with OpenAI and these types of models more and more. So I hope this is a helpful way to just think about some of these different terms and be more precise as you both think about them and communicate around them. A few more notes on the timeline here that I think is really useful. A lot of the research that is foundational for models like GPT-3, GPT-4 dates back to some papers released at Google. It's kind of interesting, as you've seen OpenAI partner with Microsoft, that actually a lot of this foundational research happened at Google not that long ago. GPT-3 has actually been around for a while. People think about it as pretty new with ChatGPT coming out last year, but it's been around since 2020. ChatGPT came out in November. That's kind of kicked off a lot of the current buzz around AI. And GPT-4 was released not that long ago, about a month ago. So this timeline hopefully is helpful to think about both how recent some of this stuff is and actually how not so recent in that, like, OpenAI is not a fly-by-night startup that was founded last year or something like that. It's been around a while. So with the GPT-4 release, working with contracts, working in law, some of you may or may not have seen, but a lot of the big news in our world and in my thinking about these types of models is that GPT-4, passed the bar. That's the quote, that's the headline. You can see here are the results that OpenAI produced. And I think it's interesting, one, that it did this in a vacuum, but I think a really key piece to this puzzle is the fact that the prior version of this model, GPT 3.5, did not pass the bar. It scored, I believe, a 10th percentile on the bar exam. So this gives you a sense for how fast the pace is now. So you had a model released in November that if you played around with as a legal professional and you were wondering, can this do parts of real substantive legal work, and you maybe decided no, this is how quickly the next version is up, and that conceptualization of this might be already outdated. So this gives you a sense for both the speed, again, recently, and how companies like OpenAI actually have been around for a while. So I think this can help think about the difference between companies, models, products, APIs. I think it's very important to understanding the ecosystem of vendors and startups that are coming online to potentially deliver products to you all. So I think AI has been used in contracts for a long time. I think it was interesting looking at the poll, at where you all are in your AI and contracting journey. But I would bet that if you're using a modern CLM, you're using AI right, today when you go back to your desk after this webinar. And I think it's to understand where we are today, I think it's important to understand where kind of the last decade has been, particularly with AI and contracts, and how you're probably already using AI. So some applications you may be familiar with, these may be embedded into the CLMs that you're using. They may be standalone products, but these are things like clause identification, software that automatically might highlight a clause of interest or give you a drop-down menu to pick a clause, maybe the termination clause, and it'll navigate you to that clause in the document. That's probably using AI. Key data point extraction, picking out dates and names, basically dates, names, deal terms, numbers, dollar amounts. This kind of thing, I think, is pretty ubiquitous in existing legal technology, and it probably is using AI. And finally, maybe some more advanced uses of AI that are already pretty common are things like automated redlining solutions. These are things you may already be using today that have been on the market for a while. So, it's hard to tell exactly, but I'm hoping some of you might be seeing this and realizing, oh, okay, like AI, I use this stuff all the time. AI is being used in contracts a lot, and a lot of what this does is help me do some of the more boring stuff a lot faster, better, cheaper. Again, you may already be using AI in contracting today, particularly probably through your CLM. The way we think about kind of the past of using AI in contracts and the present and future of using AI contracts is basically thinking about the difference between administrative tasks and substantive legal work. So when I think about administrative tasks, I think about data extraction, pouring through contract after contract, pulling out the party names, pulling out the signatories, pulling out dates. These are things that may need some specialized training depending on your use case for personnel to do these kinds of tasks, but I would not quite call them substantive legal work in terms of really requiring a deep understanding of the things that matter in contracts in terms of your rights and obligations in those contracts and mitigating risk in those contracts. So we see this kind of bottom of the iceberg in terms of substantive legal work that is currently live in some products, but is largely, the future of contracting that this current wave of AI will likely enable if it hasn't already. So what are some more of these applications? I've got a bunch of them that I'm going to throw on the screen. And there's plenty more where these came from, but these are a lot of the applications that we see both online right now, built into CLMs or in third-party applications, or things you could do with ChatGPT. In addition to things that we know there's startups that are new, that are coming online, that are specializing in these types of things. So I think one thing that I think is key to looking at in this slide is the diversity of tasks here, particularly in just the nature of those tasks, but also what parts of what different legal departments are going to be specialized and actually do these tasks in their day-to-day. And if you look in the top right, drafting, I think, is one of the big kind of killer apps that a lot of people have in mind when thinking about generative text, generative AI, ChatGPT in legal contracts. But this is just one of many very different applications that largely don't all feel like they're native to text generation or a chatbot. But through what I was talking about before with third parties using OpenAI's APIs, along with other, open source technology or other AI tools through their cloud providers or in-house hand-rolled, AI applications, all these things I see becoming more and more ubiquitous, further than they are, today, quite soon in the future. I also think it's important to think about where kind of these different applications will meet you in your day-to-day. Like I said a second ago, ChatGPT is a chatbot, but I actually see most of these applications not really being native to the chatbot interface. It's the underlying technology that I think is really interesting and can power a wide range of applications that you're going to experience through very different mediums than a chatbot. So looking at these three chatbots, word processors and SaaS apps. And by SaaS apps, I just mean, platforms like your CLM fits into here, platforms like TermScout fit into here. I see these kind of being the three main places that you'll probably meet AI in your day-to-day. And you can see, again, these drafting and kind of chatbot assistant use cases are really only a subset of this. And I see a lot of it happening where your contracts already live and where you can easily get your contracts to. So I hope that's helpful to think about kind of structuring all this large, set of disparate use cases into, where they might find themselves in your day-to-day. So a lot of these, this set is growing. A lot of these solutions are already in the market. And if you saw something on that last page that you're like, oh, I'd like to find a solution for that, I would bet that there's a startup or a CLM or someone who's got that solution, live. So let's actually look at some of these tools. Like I said, I'm really focused on this difference between administrative tasks and substantive legal tasks. So to understand the substantive legal task, which is what I think are the most exciting, I think it's an interesting starting point to look at some of these administrative tasks, and you'll probably see that like a lot of things you've already been using in your day-to-day that use AI are already fairly ubiquitous and don't seem as magic as ChatGPT, but they're important to understand and see examples of. So here's one example. This is a service called Amazon Textract. This is actually a developer tool. So I'd imagine a lot of the services you use where you upload a contract and it kind of breaks it down into different texts, that then sort it and organize it by topic and extract some data out of it, are probably using a developer platform like this under the hood through their cloud provider. AWS is the most popular cloud provider, so I would bet that this actually powers like a lot of what you all are used to using for stuff like this. You can see this is a application where you upload a contract and you can ask it a question: how many days do you have to dispute an invoice? And it'll find you the answer in this contract. So this is what I mean by data extraction, largely an administrative task that I think is this is kind of, you could argue that this is a substantive, legal data point to extract, but I think largely like this is something that a lot of white collar professionals could be trained to do, fairly easily. Another example, this is another AWS tool called Amazon Comprehend. This is kind of what you might have in mind in terms of extracting dates and names in a unsupervised way. So this is without even asking it questions, just saying, hey, can you pull out the dates and names? My purpose in showing you this is to show that like a lot of this is fairly commoditized in the back end and in the software ecosystem, to where your cloud provider for software developers who build the CLMs and the different apps that you use can kind of just plug right into this stuff and it pulls it right out. You see here's a preamble to a contract, give me the organizations and the dates in here, and it'll do that. So again, administrative tasks that I think are really in the before time of the current AI wave. Another example is a company like Zuva that, this is a free tool on their website. You can upload a contract and it does a really good job of telling, doing what they call extracting fields, which is basically what I talked about before. You have a drop down of the different names of the different clauses you might be interested in: limitation of liability, term and termination, indemnification, et cetera. And it finds them for you in the contract. And a final example, I'll actually show ChatGPT doing the same thing. So while ChatGPT in the kind of future of AI and contracts can do some really special things, it can also do the really basic things. Like, for instance, same thing again, what's the vendor's name? I ask it this just like, natural language question, grabs it out of there for me. Again, I ask, how many days do you have to dispute an invoice? Grabs it out of there for me. So while there's some really cool things that these new generative AI tools can do, they can also do a lot of the more the kind of things we're used to with AI and contracting. So let's move on to looking at some of the substantive legal tasks. So I can hope to give you an understanding of like what I really mean by substantive legal tasks and how that differs from administrative tasks. For that, we're going to look at ChatGPT. So I gave ChatGPT, and this is on the back end using GPT-4. I know I mentioned before that there's multiple models that ChatGPT can use. This is GPT-4. I gave it an indemnification clause, and I asked it, how common is it? And I got what I think is an okay answer. I was pretty vague in my question, but what I got back was like, yeah, this is, this is what you'd expect to see this in contracts. It's quite vague. But what I noticed about this indemnification clause is there's really no conditions or exclusions. It's quite broad. And so I wanted to nudge ChatGPT a little bit and just ask, are these typically not subject to conditions or exclusions? And I got what I think is a decent answer that aligns with my intuition and my experience from working with these types of clauses in a very data-driven environment like TermScout. And it's like, these actually are often present, and we didn't see them in this clause. And finally, I can ask about negotiation. Could I expect to negotiate this? And it actually goes a step beyond and says, especially in B2B transactions. So this is really just to give you a sense that, the substantive legal task of understanding what ought to be in certain clauses in terms of the rights and obligations you're subject to in a contract, and helping you think about negotiating them. I mean, this is a very, very simple example that could fit on one slide, but I really encourage all of you to go check this stuff out. GPT-4, you do have to pay for it to upgrade to, but to use ChatGPT with GPT 3.5 is totally free. And you can ask this kind of stuff all day long and spend hours in there. But I just wanted to give a sense for how thinking about substantive legal information in a contract really does differ from just extracting dates and names and identifying clauses. So the final example I have of substantive legal work happening in contracting is with TermScout, which I'm not going to do much of a dive into right now. This is our product that Otto and I have, but Otto's going to show you guys a little bit more about how this works with TermScout later on, where we really focus on the three things we think matter the most in contracts, which is, for a given clause, who does it favor and how favorable is it? How common is it? And how hard is this going to be to negotiate? Which we think that's as substantive as it gets in contracts, and that's what we really focus on. So again, you'll see some of this later from Otto. For now, I'm going to kick it over to Otto to talk some more about privacy when working with these kinds of tools.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Evan. I hope everyone else is excited as we are. I mean, we are living, I think, in just one of the most exciting times to be alive. AI, actually, the CEO of Zillow just recently told his entire team, he said, AI, I think, will be bigger than the internet itself. And he divided the entire company, Zillow, into two teams, red team, blue team. One team focused on, figuring out how to operationalize everything internally. Blue team focused on transforming the client experience. I mean, there are many, many people, ourselves among them, who are just feeling like, oh, wow, this is really just a transformational time in technology. And so kudos to all of you for being here to learn more about it. And thank you, Evan, for providing such an awesome background. I think some of those points that you covered are just really important foundations for all of us to understand as we're thinking about, how to adapt AI, how to think about it, and the like. So for the next couple minutes, I'm going to talk about privacy and security things to think about when considering leveraging different AI partners for contract issues specifically. And then we're going to show, Evan showed a little bit of AWS, Zuva, and GPT capabilities. And we're going to finally make true on our promise and also just show a little bit about TermScout's capabilities as well. TermScout does have a free AI contract review tool that you can try out, at least a free trial version. And so we'll show a little bit about what that looks like and how to leverage it, in particular, the AI functionalities for negotiating. So that's what's coming for the last few minutes of this webinar. And I'm going to share my screen and jump right in. So privacy and security considerations, this is where the rubber meets the road. For any of us who are contract professionals, it's almost, there's this irony where we're trying to use AI to do contracts better, but we're also, as contract professionals, the folks in charge of managing risk in our organization. So there's some really interesting things to consider here. And we thought it'd be fun to walk through a few of those ideas. First, it starts with a foundational principle that your contract data, generally, much of it is confidential information, right? It has pricing details, it has payment terms, it has a lot of data in it that your company or clients likely consider to be confidential. So if you take that for granted, you also then quickly come to the conclusion that it's not just your confidential information that you're dealing with, it's also your counterparty's confidential information, because contracts, of course, are shared instruments. Us and our counterparties are party to them, and oftentimes under the terms of the contracts themselves, we're agreeing that the contents are confidential. Even if we're not agreeing, they likely, under many confidentiality provisions, might be covered by the confidentiality rules. So, so we think many contracts are confidential information, and as a contract professional, your job is to mitigate risk, right? That's our function. And when I was practicing law as a contract professional, that was the first and foremost aspect of the job. And so when we're thinking about leveraging AI to do our job better, we really have to think critically about how we balance the need for efficiency, the need to do the job better, with the important impetus not to introduce any more risk into the organization. And so we'll talk about that. I mean, the bottom line is, what we don't want to be as contract professionals is these guys and gals over at Samsung who reportedly leaked sensitive information into ChatGPT by accident. There were headlines all last week. Many contract professionals and lawyers were passing this around. I was on some threads where people were saying, oh my goodness, are we going to be in trouble if we start uploading contracts into ChatGPT? Pump the brakes, slow down. Let's really think about the privacy and security implications of these tools. So that's what we're going to talk about. And hopefully, I expect everyone will leave here not only with a little bit of a clear understanding of what some of the different companies are doing and asking for and offering in their contracts with respect to data privacy and security, but also with some tools for how to go get that information, not just on the tools we'll talk about today, but whatever other tools you might be looking at. So how do you assess the risk of different AI platforms? Well, no surprise, to anyone in this room, I imagine it starts with the contracts, right? The contract is the instrument that's allocating risk among the parties, and that's typically binding the vendor to restrictions on how they can use your data, obligations on how they protect your data, and so forth. So we think at TermScout, there are three things, if I'm the user of an AI tool, three things that I want to make sure I get right in my contracts with AI companies. Some of these I think were alluded to in the chat already. The first one I think is liability, right? What kinds of remedies do you have if something goes wrong with this vendor? This is, the rest of the contract doesn't matter, in my opinion, if you don't have any remedies for breach of contract or data breaches or anything else. So to me, I think to most contract professionals, I'm sure many of you would agree, this is kind of first and foremost, what are my remedies if something goes wrong? The second thing, as somebody did ask this question in the chat already, what about data usage? How does the vendor use your data? I think this was a big part of the Samsung concern was, okay, some coders, for those of you who didn't follow the story, some engineers had pasted some source code, some very confidential trade secret caliber source code into ChatGPT to try to get some code recommendations and very common use case for engineers today. And Samsung was concerned about how that data could be used. Could somebody else actually summon that data out of OpenAI in some way? And it's just a big, scary unknown for this very new technology. So you can look at the contract, and we're going to do that in just a second, and understand at least what does the contract say about how the vendor can or cannot use the data that you submit to it. And then data security, of course. Data usage is one thing. How do they use it? The other thing is, how do they protect it? If I'm submitting lots and lots of contracts that are being stored there, how do I know, how do I get confidence that they're not going to be subject to a leak, a hack, some embarrassing moment where all of the contracts that I uploaded to this platform are all of a sudden sprayed all over the internet? So I think those are the top three things. And we're going to go in now and click this link. I think we will share this deck afterwards, so you'll get this link and you can come in here as well. We're going to go we haven't introduced the Term Scout application yet. I'm going to talk about it in a minute, but one of the features of the Term Scout application is the ability to compare contracts on a side-by-side basis. So Term Scout has what's called the verified public database. And in that verified public database, we've reviewed thousands of public contracts from companies like AWS and Term Scout and others. And I'm just going to create a little comparison here. So we can look at Term Scout's contract, one AI contract provider focused on contracts specifically. We can look at the AWS customer agreement, and we can look at OpenAI, the OpenAI LLC terms of use. So we'll go take a look at these, and I'm just going to show limits on liability. We can go into other topics, but I've summarized that on another slide just to show kind of how this works. So you can go in, by the way, you could go add many, many other contracts on the Term Scout platform and do these line by line comparisons. One of the things we mentioned that we talk about today is how to use AI to negotiate better. And we think one of the answers to that question, maybe the most compelling answer, is the best negotiating leverage you can get oftentimes is a thorough understanding, clear, objective data about what different companies in the space are doing. Because if you can go to a company and say, hey, 3 of your competitors are offering this thing that I'm asking for, it becomes very hard for that vendor to deny you that request. So let's look at liability caps, thinking about remedies with these 3 vendors. These are the public contracts that each of these companies offer their customers when they sign up to use these tools. So Term Scout's got a 12-month cap. AWS has a 12-month cap. OpenAI has a varying liability that includes 12 months fees. You can actually click in here, and if you look at the source language, you'll see that it's actually the greater of $100 or 12 months fees. Okay, so it's basically 12 months fees cap. So all the caps on liability are the same for these companies. Term Scout does have a secondary cap covering data-related claims, and then it has a few exceptions to the cap. IP indemnity exception, other indemnity obligations, violations of confidential information. Term Scout accepts unlimited liability for violating your confidential information. AWS has no exceptions to the cap, and OpenAI has no exceptions to the cap. So you've got some data here on limits on liability. You can go in, as I mentioned, and compare lots and lots of different provisions. What kind of reps and warranties do we get, and so on and so forth. I'm going to jump back to our slides, and we've gone ahead and just summarized kind of the 3 key provisions that we think matter from these contracts, having looked at them and gone through the details. So here's that summary. And if you go through, the real thing to highlight here, Term Scout, we've thought a lot about how to provide our customers with a contract that makes them feel safe submitting their contracts to us. And the point of this slide is really to communicate. I don't think we're the only ones doing this. I think really one of the things that I recommend you look for when you're thinking about a Harvey or a case text or another application layer that you're doing business with that's using, for example, OpenAI's APIs, is like, what kind of contract can I get? Can I get a better contract by using a third-party software application that is leveraging some of these other AI tools and maybe using it and offering something better? So if you just compare Term Scout and OpenAI here, you'll see, Term Scout, I think on the remedies scores really high. 12 months fees, super cap for data, numerous exceptions to the cap. Like it's, this is a pretty generous offer. We've got market data to back this up. And OpenAI's 12 months fees with no exceptions, right? Term Scout does ask its users to share anonymized aggregated data, but it offers an opt-out mechanism that's in the contract. And if you opt out, you share no data with Term Scout. So, really positive, I think, on the data usage. Our customers have asked for this over and over, and we provided it. OpenAI does allow an opt-out, but interestingly, only for the API users. So if Term Scout uses OpenAI's APIs and then pulls that data into the application, we can actually honor this and almost shield our customers from OpenAI's ability to use the data to train on or for other purposes. But if you use ChatGPT, you'll see in their terms and conditions that they do reserve the right to train their machine learning, for example, on your data that you input into ChatGPT. So, user beware. ChatGPT, probably not a good place to input confidential information, sensitive information. Don't put your trade secrets into ChatGPT. If you want to do that, find a third-party software application that you can work with or through to do that in a way that you have a good, clear contract that protects the confidentiality of that information and also gives you a good remedy should something go wrong. So that's our summary of kind of these contracts. And I think we've just got a few minutes left. So I think in the last few minutes, I was going to jump in and show how you can use Term Scout to analyze a contract. And I was going to have a little bit of fun here. Let's see if I can get back and upload we do have one more slide. Evan, do you want to touch on this? Actually, before you touch on this, let me get this queued up. So we're in the Term Scout application here, and I'm going to take OpenAI's terms of use. So this is the contract you sign when you sign up for ChatGPT. I'm going to load them into Term Scout's AI contract review tool. It's going to take a minute to upload. I'll let Evan walk you through just a little bit of background on Term Scout's unique approach to machine learning AI technology while this is loading. So I'm just telling Term Scout, this is a tech contract. I'm the customer of OpenAI. It's not a negotiated agreement. Please keep my data private. And then I'm going to load in the OpenAI website terms of use here. You could upload files if you wanted. I'm just going to say the vendor is OpenAI. And it already saw that the contract is called the terms of use. So I'm going to hit the review contract button. And let's see if this kicks off. Yeah, so this is kicking off an AI only analysis of this contract. And while that's going, Evan, I'm going to jump into, says it'll take a couple of minutes to do this. So Evan, do you want to share just a quick high level on this slide?
Yeah, sure thing. So, one thing we didn't touch on that much today is the benefits and trade-offs of having AI trained specifically on contracts and for contracts versus using generically trained AI like ChatGPT and OpenAI. One thing to note, we talked a second ago about how GPT-4 passed the bar. One of the most interesting and exciting things about that is that it wasn't particularly trained to. It just could do it. Because of its logical reasoning ability and just all the contract information and legal content that it's consumed just naturally in its training. So you've kind of got this notion of, well, do I want to use AI that's trained on contracts for contracting, or do I want to use general purpose? We've experimented a ton with both of these. My team right now is in just some rapid experimentation of some new and exciting things we can do with some of the general purpose AI that we're excited about. But we've also spent a ton of time training AI on contracts specifically, particularly making it purpose-built to answer the questions that matter. The things like what Otto was just showing, liability cap, exceptions to the liability cap, et cetera, hundreds of these things for contracts to make them really, really good at answering those questions and making sure that it knows what we mean when we ask those questions, and then that's standardized. Because if you kind of casually ask some of those questions without being specific, and you ask those questions to a general purpose generative AI, you might not get a specific answer if you're not that specific and intentional with the question you ask. So we've done a lot of work in combining these two things into an end-to-end software solution. Our tagline here is built by legal experts for legal experts. That means software engineers and machine learning experts combined with subject matter experts and legal experts to build a solution that is purpose-built as a software platform to do the things that we think are really important to do with contracts versus something that might be more kind of exciting because it's flexible and it can do anything, but that might not give you the interface or the experience that you want at the end of the day. So that's a little bit about our solution and what we actually think is something to look for as you're looking at these solutions. Do you have legal experts on staff in your SaaS startup who's claiming to do X for contracts. That's something to think about when you're thinking about, is it going to really ask and answer the questions that matter to me, and solve the things that matter to me as a contract professional, or might it be more generic and more casual in what it's interested in finding? So I don't know if our live demo has succeeded over there or not, Otto, but that's about all I got.
I hope it has. I imagine it has. I want to touch on two quick questions here. The Diana and Anna Roop, sorry if I mispronounced anybody's names, asked about how do you understand level of confidence indicators? I'll show this in TermScout's platform in just a moment. And also, how do you know when it's safe to trust AI results? I think this is one of the big critiques or fears right now of tools like ChatGPT is you've all read about the tendency of OpenAI or ChatGPT to hallucinate, which is kind of to make up answers. And more broadly, or even stepping back a step, ChatGPT doesn't give you the ability to really check the sources on where the information is coming from. So you kind of have to blindly trust that tool in particular in a way that I think makes many of us a little bit nervous. At TermScout, I'm going to show, so let me jump into, let's see if our AI demo, live demo, which you should never do. Oh, it worked. Okay, awesome news. So here are the results of our review of the OpenAI test contract. Oh, I did it because I typoed the capital T here. When we provide predictions, we provide confidence indicators and crucially source language. So if we say that vendor's liability is limited, we're saying, hey, we have high confidence, 92% confidence in this particular prediction. And we give our users access to the source language that proves the veracity of the statement. So you can, within one click, check our work, right? I believe as a lawyer that, if you're going to trust a tool, you need this information. You need the tool to be able to identify when the prediction that it's giving you is strong and when it's weak. Because if it turns out this is a really important determination for your use case and confidence is only 82%, okay, I know that's where I'm going to spend my time double checking because this matters a lot and the confidence is low. So that's how we handle confidence. Let me give a quick overview of what we're seeing here. So we uploaded the OpenAI terms of use. And basically what we're seeing here, the first thing we see is what's the expected negotiating effort? Now, somebody else in the chat said, can I really negotiate with these AI vendors? And I think the answer is no. I mean, I don't even think OpenAI, they don't have a sales team right now for you to interact with. So I don't think you're negotiating with them. But if this were a CRM vendor or something, and you were negotiating, you could expect, based on how far from market this contract is, your effort would be high. Here's our rating prediction. So this is, as Evan said, our attempt to identify how much of the contract favors OpenAI versus you. It's just a gut check. It's art, not science. But our prediction here is that this is a pretty vendor favorable contract. And then we've got some negotiating tips and a few key data points that you can look at. The next thing you see is what we call a term sheet. And the term sheet attempts to just summarize, the key provisions in the contract. Well, what are the limits on the customer's liability? Unfortunately, in this one, we didn't find any limits on the customer's liability. What type of indemnities is the vendor offering? So this is another place where OpenAI isn't indemnifying its customers for any claims. For those of you who negotiate or understand IT contracts, you know that that's a pretty rare thing. No exceptions to the vendor's cap. So the next thing you get, besides the term sheet, you got this summary here. The next thing you get is negotiating tips. If you were negotiating with this vendor, you would, start here. What are the provisions in this contract that are furthest from market that are bad for me? The first one is no exceptions to the vendor's liability cap. TermScout has a proprietary set of negotiated IT contracts, so similar contracts. And in that data set, only 15% of them have this particular clause or provision. So right away, I've got something that's bad for me and sub-market, no limits on my liability, no indemnity by the vendor. So these are some of the things that are, they're rare, they're bad for me from the customer's perspective, and they're a big part of what gives rise to these ratings. Now, Evan mentioned earlier the sort of difference between AI that does administrative tasks, clause extraction, entity identification, stuff like that, and AI that's really getting into substantive legal work. And that's where I think this is such an exciting time to see tools that are able to, you saw when I loaded this contract in, I didn't have to think about what questions to ask it. I just told it, this is it's a technology contract. I'm the customer, so I'm telling TermScout what my perspective is in this relationship. With very little information, TermScout was able to say, okay, from the customer's perspective, here are some things to negotiate. Here's some key data. It's a very simple, modern way, I think, to analyze a contract and understand a contract. So, you've got your negotiating tips. And then the last two things I'll show you is the full analysis is just, every data point we extracted that we think matters about this contract, organized by topic. So, go on through data basics. You've got tons and tons of data here on each of these topics. So you've got that full analysis there should you need more data. And then you do have the ability to upload secondary documents. So a lot of the times you'll see a primary document that says, we're also incorporating by reference our privacy policy, a DPA, whatever it is. If we had more time, we could go upload those documents, and these results would adjust based on what they find within those documents. So I think we're getting close to time. We're pretty much at time here. So Preston, I'll hand it over to you. We can ask more questions or just let you wrap up.
Yeah, Otto, Evan, thanks. We got about 4 minutes to go. I want to wrap on a few ending points, so don't go anywhere, folks. First things first, as a recap, this was awesome. I think what we saw today was we did the poll at the beginning. We saw a lot of people who were just dipping their toe into understanding how to leverage AI to negotiate contracts, to redline contracts, to review contracts, whatever it may be. And Evan gave an incredible primer on the ways to both talking about specific solutions that are available in the market, as well as types of categories of solutions that might already be embedded inside CLM solutions and others. So I thought that was great. And then Otto, I think it's nice to see what this looks like live. And obviously the best thing to do is demo a product that you are familiar with. So seeing TermScout was really, really helpful. I think what is interesting about TermScout for Law Insider is that there are ways to adopt AI that are free, that have risk, and there's ways to spend $100,000 a year to adopt AI that may not have as much risk, but represent considerable budget ask. And in a moment where I think a lot of CEOs, CFOs, and others are pushing businesses, both internal, whoever said the red-blue example of the red team facing it, looking internally, and the other team externally, we know that our external product teams are looking at AI across industries, but we also have teams looking internally that are calling on legal teams saying, what's your plan? What are you doing? And I think it's incumbent upon all of us as legal professionals and software professionals to take ownership of that problem. And so I commend all of you who spent an hour with us today to learn a bit about that. What I'm going to do, Law Insider and TermScout do have a partnership. A lot of the questions that came in were not about TermScout, and we're going to follow up with answers. Apologies, we didn't get to it. A lot of the questions were about TermScout. So we're going to do an overtime session that starts in 4 minutes. If you got to go, because we promised an hour, and this thing is going to cut off in 2 minutes, and you're welcome to head off. We'll send the recording, we'll send links, we'll send the slides. We'll probably do a version of this webinar again, so you're good and covered. But if you really want to see the full scope of what TermScout has to offer, hang out with Otto and Evan. We're just going to keep on the same Zoom. They're going to go under the hood in a deeper way. We saw one feature today. We didn't see the full application of TermScout. So if you're interested, but there's one other thing, and that is that I promised that we would do one more poll, and the poll is about the TermScout and Law Insider relationship. And that is that, and Otto, maybe you can give a voiceover why this poll is up. The Scout plan is $49 for Law Insider subscribers. So this is, a fraction or 50% of what you would pay in the open market. I bring it up because you should go test free tools. But before you go buy a $100,000 tool or try to get budget for it, I would take a step forward with something like this that is much lower price, but also delivers real value to an in-house team or an attorney that is negotiating in a format that is similar to what Otto just shared with you. We will follow up with a code if you are interested. No obligation though. You're welcome to sign up for TermScout for free. You can go to termscout.com, get a free account, kick the tires, see how it is. But if you do decide to sign up, I think, Otto, you guys are going to shut this off. The 50%, I think, is only good till the end of the month. Is that right?
Yeah, we'll offer that till the end of the month. It's a month-to-month subscription at $49 a month. So as Preston said, I mean, our goal is to make this, very, very easy to try. And it includes unlimited AI reviews. So that tool that you saw, that function that I just did with OpenAI's contract, you can upload those all day long to the system if you want. Really good for IT and services agreements today, rolling out NDAs and DPAs soon. So you'll see some more functionality coming out, but cost effective. If you do purchase before the end of the month there, you'll be locked into that $49 a month for the entire year if you choose to continue.
Awesome. Thanks. We have, let's see, 107 people filled out the survey. So thank you. So about half of the people who are still on. What else? Law Insider is going to be launching a contract tech focused newsletter. So many of you, probably all of you, got signed up for this. 98% of you signed up for this event from the Law Insider newsletter, which is our weekly, goes out every Friday. Mike Whalen, you get an email from Molly, contract teardown, etc. We're going to go hyper focused and do a sub newsletter that you have to opt into that is just focused on contract technology. It'll promote events like this one with Otto and Evan. It'll have ebooks. It'll have articles written by experts. We'll do interviews, but it's going to be a great journey. We'll see. Maybe the newsletter stays around for forever, but we'll at least run it for a year as we're all in the middle of this quickly changing period of time. I think Otto mentioned that there's speculation that this is going to be bigger than the internet itself. Like it's mind blowing. I think legal professionals who are often labeled as laggards, we take that personally, some of us, at least the ones who are on this webinar, because we're certainly not. But there's things that we adopt later. Like we're not using Calendly yet or whatever it may be, but we're all using email. Right? We all have websites. There's some types of technology that just permeate and go against whatever the prevailing trend is or view on our reluctance to adopt technology because it is so disruptive. We all have iPhones. We all love the BlackBerry, but they were like, okay, the iPhone's better. So we did it. This is such a moment, if not bigger. And so we all got to catch up. We got to figure out what this means. So with that, Otto and Evan, I don't know if you guys want to take a coffee break or anything. We'll hang out here again. We're going to do an overtime session now. These two gentlemen are going to open up the hood of TermScout. They're going to show you the full product, more than just what you saw right now. They're going to answer questions. So people who already submitted questions about how TermScout works, we'll answer those. And if you hang out, you can ask more. It'll be a smaller group, I assume. We still have about 150 people on those, so maybe not that small. And with that, let's pause here for a couple of minutes. I'll let you guys get set up, grab water, bathroom break for those at home, whatever you need to do. Let's meet back here at 5 after or 6 after, and we'll kick off this overtime session with Otto and Evan. For those who need to jump, thank you for being here. We're going to send the recording. We're going to send the slides. We're going to do more content like this. Look out for an email with that information from Molly at lawinsider.com and any resources that were mentioned today, zuva.ai, things like that. We'll make sure that we link those in, I was going to say show notes because that's what the podcasters say, but it's just going to be in the email. Okay, that's it. I'm going to close this poll. Thanks for the 120 of you who completed it. And guys, good job. Thank you for doing this.